Howdy, all of you delicious people. One thing that I want to say, and especially the very beginning of this review, is thank God for streaming. Thank God for streaming. So, if anything, like, you can watch whatever movie at the luxury of your own home. Whether it's going to be, like, the greatest movie that you've ever seen in your life, or whatever ends up to be just something that wastes X amount of time of your life, which that you accidentally fall and slip your way into as well. So, a lot of people are asking right now, hey man, like, yeah, I wanted to come in here because I'm kind of curious whether or not I should download Paramount Plus to watch Infinity. I'm curious. Should I do that or no? Here's where I'm going to help you out, try to help you understand this movie and help you also understand whether or not you should do Paramount Plus. I am immediately going to tell you, if you want to watch this movie on Paramount Plus, you don't need to do so. If anything, I've been using an app that's very reliable, and this is not a selling point. It's not. There's an app called C Movies, the letter C and then Movies. If you have a Google Play account, you can go into this app called C Movies and watch this movie for absolutely free. Plus, you can watch a number of billions upon billions of other things, of new releases or stuff that just randomly is just a billion years old that you're like, hey, wow, I want to watch billion-year-old movie. Wow, that's great. I can do this on this app. That sounds interesting. Because I would not say to download Paramount Plus to watch Infinity. I would honestly say go out of your way to find some other way that this movie is going to be relevant elsewhere. Really, I know there's some people that might just been like, well, dude, I just downloaded it regardless. Like, because I have other Paramount Plus needs. And then I just so happened to just see this movie on the docket, and I'm like, I want to watch a review about Infinity. Well, you're in luck because I'm going to talk about this movie. So, I want to say that this movie, honestly, to me, has an interesting concept, but it also has poor execution. So, really, that can help people understand whether people might be interested in this movie or not. It just has poor, like, execution of this film. A lot of people would immediately just say, well, I'm here just because of a Mark Wahlberg film, because I'm a Mark Wahlberg fan, and that's where those movies tend to get you. Like, it kind of gets to the point where I saw like Spencer Confidential just because Mark Wahlberg was in that movie, and I was like, you know what, that movie was just kind of like, it seems like Mark Wahlberg is tied into a lot of the, like, general action movies where like at least this one had some kind of like interesting like concept, but again, poor execution. But like at least there was like something there that just didn't feel like normal run of the mill action movie. And I guess I could applaud this movie for that. But here's the thing. So this movie kind of reminds me of the Tom Hanks Holly Berry film Cloud Atlas, where like you have one one person who is to be living a number of different lives, but it's really actually just, instead of like Holly Berry playing like 12 people, it's basically the brain of Holly Berry being inside 12 different people, and like that's what Infinity is. Like, basically Mark Wahlberg's character's brain is inside all of these other reincarnations, and it seems that Mark Wahlberg's character, who is Ethan, is to not have the ability of any of the knowledge of his previous incarnations. And so in this movie, they have to figure out how to reset Mark Wahlberg's brain so he can remember all of the previous incarnations, as well as eventually, I guess, keeping this set for when Ethan's character is going to eventually go into another body, maybe in this film. Um, or they may like try to set this up for a sequel, which I want to see them do a sequel of this film. I want to see them try. Who are they going to have for the sequel of this film? I dare them to make a sequel. I dare them. I want to see Infinity 2 because this movie was just like, wow. Because, like, so you're gonna like think that the people in the very beginning of this film are someone you're going to invest in for the rest of this movie, and you would be wrong. And then they all of a sudden have a different set of people, and then you have to like invest in them throughout a bulk of this movie, and then again wrong. But like, but that can't happen a bajillion times over and over and over, could it? Let's see in the sequel or the squeakquel. So, but anyway, so, yeah, like Mark Wahlberg is in a pretty decent amount of this film. Like I think this movie has an interesting concept, but like there's just like the whole like Lucy thing where, like the Scarlett Johansson movie Lucy, where like Mark Wahlberg is only using a certain percentage of his reincarnation brain, and so eventually they need to like reset that to get to 11, or in this case 100% of reincarnation brain, so that way Ethan's character can figure out some riddle that he is to realize. But yeah, so this movie, like, the weird thing about this film is it thinks it's explaining things, but it's not. There's some people where I'm like, I don't understand what that person had any connection with this movie whatsoever. It seems like some of this dialogue is just like going in one ear and going out the other at some points in this movie. Because I'm like, okay, what was the guy from Captain America First Avenger, like, and his name was like Porter? What the heck was he even doing in this film? What was the point of him in film? I don't understand. And I just didn't care. Cause I'm like, if anything, like immediately once this movie opened, I was like, you know what, this feels like a six like the Ryan Reynolds film, like the Six Underground movie or whatever that one was called. Like this opens with like a Fast and Furious like Transporter 2 sequence going on here. Like, you know when Transporter 2 had the sequence where Jason Statham had to like have the bomb under his car, and so Jason Statham had to just drive and do this flip and have this like crane-esh like thing grab onto this bomb, and then he flipped the car back into perfect like ability to drive back off with this same car. That's what it feels like the very beginning of the sequence is, and I was just kind of like, okay, but like that's really not all of this movie. Like evidently there's more understanding of previous body or previous person. But yeah, so this movie thinks it's explaining things, but it's not. But that's okay. Some people might understand it more than I could, and that's perfectly fine. If anybody goes out of their way to explain this movie to me, I will laugh at them. Because I'm like, there's never going to be a sequel to this film. Anything that is broken down by anyone does not matter to me. This movie was like, it had a good concept, but that's it. Like, that's all. It's just, they needed to do an action movie with Mark Wahlberg in it. Like, it kind of felt like this one was like, they needed to, like, do a Mark Wahlberg movie quota. And so, like, this one just had to be that. And then they were like, well, we can't put this out anywhere, so Paramount Plus. Like, it would have been interesting to see if this movie would have actually, like, delivered out in theaters, because, like, I don't think it would have. Like, I don't think you could justify this movie actually going out in theaters, and people would have been like, dude, we gotta go in droves to see Infinity. But like, there's something about this movie that I guess is just interesting enough for you to want to go into. But there is some goofy things also about this movie. And goofy in not exactly the win column of this film. But when looking at it also, if you're just a Mark Wahlberg fan, then go ahead and check this movie out. Because either way, he's just going to keep doing these kinds of movies that aren't probably going to be like big winners in the win column, with the exclusion of probably Uncharted, that eventually is somewhere down the road. But, anyways, so I think it's about that coveted time. I've talked enough about this, so let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of this film, we have a Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift opening of this sequence, Six Underground Ryan Reynolds style film that was produced by Michael Bay, because I saw that movie and then I was like, wow, this is a action movie. That's how great Six Underground was. It's an action film. They kind of did some interesting things, but that's how exciting Infinity is, that I'm wanting to talk about Six Underground, which isn't that great of a movie overall. So, anyways, Infinity. So, we have Mark Wahlberg in the very beginning of this film, who is to tell us, like, technically what is going on with the Infinites, and that there are some people that are the villainous Infinite people. And pretty much for me, with that whole dialogue kind of explaining things, like, basically went in one ear and quickly out the other, because I'm like, I'm hoping that this movie should actually, explain things, and it doesn't. And really, I'm like, the whole description of what they say in the very beginning, I'm like, I don't care. Like, this movie needs to help me understand things, not just give me some Star Wars like dialogue or monologue in the film helping you. Like, that's what a movie should do, visually help you understand what's going on. Like, Push did that. Why can't this movie do that? Like, why do you have to give me a monologue in the very beginning of the film, like, just summarizing what you think Infinity is, and I still don't get it, and you can continue to try to explain it in the film, which you don't do it all that great. In all honesty, just a boatload of hooey. It's a boatload of hooey that they talk about in this movie. They talk about freaking eggs being a annihilator of destruction. An egg? But let's go into the very beginning of this film. So, the very beginning of this film is to have, like, I'm having fun with this, so I need to have fun with it. So, we have Treadway, who is the Mark Wahlberg of previous incarnation, and we have people in this other car that are to be Abel and I think uh, Leona. Sure. So that's what happens when you can't get an exact thing of things. So we have these Treadways in one car, and these two other people are in another car, and so Treadway is driving along. He's all over the place with his hands, and so we have this interesting little trick that Treadway does where he is to try to make a 150-foot gap of something. And so Treadway drives and he goes and he tosses out his body onto this crane and he makes it. And so Treadway is to tell his friends that if he actually does not make this, like him catching onto this crane thing, that all they need to do is look inside. Sure, look inside. The whole entire movie is just a riddle. So we'll figure out what that riddle is in this movie. So that pushes on to all of a sudden now having us to show Mark Wahlberg's character. And so Mark Wahlberg's character is supposedly a schizophrenic who is desperately trying to find a job because he needs to be able to have a job to afford his schizophrenia medication. And so Mark is trying to desperately find a job, and so he's immediately like shaking hands with the man. And by Evan, who is Mark Wahlberg, talking to this guy who's gonna give him this job offer, Evan can already tell that he's not going to get this job because this guy is coming up with every single thing of this guy's past that would say, you know what, I'm probably not gonna hire you because of this reason, because you had started a fight with somebody, because you had spent supposedly 2 weeks at some mental hospital, and this reason and that reason. And so Evan is trying to kind of rationalize or try to like justify that it's like, well, hey man, like I only spent 2 weeks in a hospital, in a mental hospital, and hey man, like everything is fine. Like if anything, I can easily do this job. And so this guy is just like, well, like, yeah, how about I have my people call your people and we'll see where this will go in the future. And Evan's like, you're not going to give me this job, are you? And the guy is like, well, like, really, when looking at it, no. No. So Evan is to leave, and so now Evan is to go and try to make like a katana, like, or like a Japanese like sword, and he is to be able to easily make one and easily be able to give this to his drug dealer that is going to give him more um, give him more schizophrenic like medication. Evidently this is medication for like psychotic like medication. So yeah, so Evan is to go and try to get this medication from this guy and bargain with that with a sword that Mark had made, literally himself. Like it shows him actually making it. So so Evan goes and hands this guy this sword, and this guy is like bizarrely like playing around with it, where like it seems like this dealer is just kind of like cutting things and getting to the point of almost like playing with his girlfriend with the sword. And Evan is like, you know what, like, if you go and you kill this woman or you like accidentally hurt this woman like badly, like there isn't any coming back from that. And so like maybe you should stop like really like heavily playing with his sword. So so eventually like Evan this entire time is being asked all kinds of questions, like these random like Jeopardy like questions. And of course Evan bizarrely has the answer for it because it seems that Evan knows everything about everything, and it like none of these people know why, and neither does Evan. Because this guy's like asking him questions about some location, and Evan like tells the actually correct pronunciation of where this location is, and so on and so forth. Um, and so uh, consistently, like this one guy with this dealer is asking Evan questions. Of course, he has the answer to. So they ask him like why is he so smart, and he's like, I don't know, like I don't know how I'm doing half of this, I don't know how to do any, I don't know how I'm doing any of it. So so Evan is to get his pills, and evidently they like shorted him on his medication, and Evan is obviously telling him, hey, like you shorted me on my meds, like if anything I gave you this sword like that I handmade myself, it's like a one of a kind, and you're gonna short me on my medication? It's like evidently you don't realize that like I need this medication. So eventually it just leads to eventually Evan like taking this knife from this guy and really just kind of countering it to where like this knife is at this guy's throat. Uh, and so, because Evan is behind him with the knife at this guy's throat, and and Evan is wanting this guy to actually take him seriously about the medication, and so uh, the drug dealer is to give Evan his medication, and so Evan is to just be like, well, like I guess I'm just gonna get out of here because like this is it, this is all I'm gonna get. So Evan runs off and takes this sword with him, and I'm like, what is this going to be, like a Highlander situation? Is this going to be like a reboot of Highlander, and we're not going to realize this until like they keep going along in this movie? But it's not. Like I was expecting like some kind of like almost like technical Highlander reboot going on here. But I like the fact that eventually Evan keeps using this sword in this movie. Like it kind of makes it interesting. Um, because I was expecting the entire time that they were just gonna like eventually like put a gun in Mark Wahlberg's hand, which they've done a bajillion other times in a bajillion other movies. But let's move on. So Mark is to try to escape because bullets are basically bouncing all around him. Because of this drug dealer firing bullets into where Mark is. So Mark starts running off, and eventually he jumps over this one wall, and so Mark Wahlberg is on the very top of this wall before he's to jump all the way onto the ground. And so all of a sudden, Mark Wahlberg is starting to see this gigantic looking like mountain of a cliff because this guy is now hallucinating and seeing something that is not actually there. So uh like as if like he's on like Mount Kilimanjaro, and then all of a sudden he's seeing this huge gap where he shouldn't, and so Mark Wahlberg is just kind of falling, not knowing where he actually is, and he falls on top of this car. The police come and they collect Evan, and they collect his sword as well, and they're like, "Well, yeah, like we collected this guy because he had a sword on him, so yeah, we're gonna arrest this guy. So Evan is in some interrogation room, and so now we have a guy named Bathurst come in, who's supposedly the 2020 version of Bathurst. And so Bathurst is to be he could be a old friend of Evan's, or he could be a enemy of Evan. That part just seems to be there's not quite clear. So Evan is to eventually sit in this interrogation room, and so all of a sudden Bathurst is to bust out the sword that Evan wants to have, and then Evan is to like say, well, yeah, that's my sword. And so Bathurst is like, well, yeah, like, how is it that you're all of a sudden a blacksmith? How is it that all of a sudden you can do all these things? Like, this doesn't quite make sense. And so all of a sudden Bathurst starts putting these like random objects in front of Evan. And so Bathurst also mentions like, well, hey, like, don't you remember when you and me, like, we fought in a war together? And Evan is like, so what now? Like, what war? In what year? What? And so all of a sudden, Bathurst starts stacking bullets in front of these objects, and Bathurst puts one bullet into the chamber of his gun, and now he's going to play some Russian roulette here. So Evan is very confused at this moment of what the heck is going on. And so Bathurst is to push one object in front of Evan and say, is this yours? And Evan is like, no. And Bathurst is like, well, like, you should know what this is. You should know good and well that this is something that was yours. And so Evan's like, well, I don't know. And immediately there is a trigger of this gun that is to be pulled. There is no bullet coming out of here, so Evan is fine. And Evan is like, what the heck, man? Like, what the heck? Like, you're shooting me? And Bathurst is like, every time you're going to say I don't know, I'm going to pull this trigger. And so Bathurst keeps shoving more items in front of Evan, confusing the heck out of the audience, I'm sure. Maybe? No? You understand? Good. Thumbs up for you. So, you probably saw this movie more than once, and then you're probably still like, but thumbs up for you if you saw this more than once. Definitely. Double thumbs up. Vicious thumbs up to you. Anyways. So, Evan goes on to keep, like, touching these items. And he's like, I don't know. And so Bathurst keeps, like, going and pulling the trigger for every single one of these times we get an I don't know, or even sometimes a lie. Like, we have Evan even going to the last object and him saying, like, yes, I remember this. And Bathurst pulls the trigger again because he's like, you're lying to me. You need to tell me the truth. Like, last chance. So, all of a sudden, Evan is to remember some past part of his life where he is to take this patch-like thing and use it as some, like, slingshot device to hurt somebody. But, like, none of this seems actually like a clear image that I could even understand. And, like, I'm not even understanding any of this reincarnation memory stuff because I'm like, what is this? What is going on? Huh? And you know what also doesn't help with that though? Also, just having a woman just crash in to this whole interrogation thing and stealing Evan and driving away. And but here's the cool thing though, everything going on in this part with both Nora and Evan actually looks pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of like it kind of reminded me of like Winter Soldier. Like you know when like Nick Fury was doing his thing uh and it was eventually against like the Winter Soldier that actually was the Winter Soldier came in and was trying to take out Nick Fury. Like this spot here kind of reminded me of Winter Soldier. I think this part was actually cool. Like I didn't mind this kind of part. So Evan is to be like at first Nora is to be driving, then all of a sudden Evan is to be driving, and then Nora is just to be like the person that is going to be like tossing bombs every once in a while, that is to eventually go and like flip cars or eventually like start like crumbling some streets of certain vehicles and stuff like that. But like it's kind of interesting how like uh Nora goes and like switches and has like her steering wheel like go into her car and then all of a sudden like appears into the other part of the car with Mark Wahlberg. Like that actually looked pretty cool. Like I honestly wish that like actual cars could do that anyways. Cause you never know when someone is all of a sudden gonna have like a heart attack or something while they're driving, and like you could just instantly transition somebody to drive, or like think of like long road trips where eventually somebody would just like, hey man, like I'm tapped out, like I'm gonna fall asleep, I'm gonna have you do the car now, you go ahead, and then I'll just take a little nappy poo and then just give me an hour and then we'll be good to go again. So so Evan is driving this car, not understanding who this woman is. And so both Nora and Evan are to go on a plane together. And this is kind of like the red pill, blue pill from the Matrix situation, where Evan has to decide to get on this plane to help him much more understand why he's getting these visions, why he's getting all these things. And it's actually not schizophrenia, it's just his infinity power at work, or his incarnation powers that are to help him understand him more, but he's like rejecting it for some bizarrish reason. So because Nora like explains to him like you're not schizophrenic, it's just your powers at work. Like this is kind of reminding me of like the FX show Legion, but like Legion actually had multiple different superpowers where this guy just has certain kind of knowledge from different other people of his previous life. I was like, is this trying to almost like give me some of that sweet delicious like feel of Moon Knight, but like again, like even that was just a real stretch to even think of that. But like I was like trying to figure out some kind of something where I could justify my enjoyment. So um so Nora is explaining how like Evan like bizarrely just could pick up blacksmithing because in his previous incarnation he was a actual just blacksmith. And at one point, the reason why Evan can speak Russian is because in a previous incarnation, he was a Russian person. So, and I guess he didn't get anything from Treadway that made any rational sense to learn anything from that. So, Evan is just like, you know what? Like, maybe, like, all of this craziness that you're trying to tell me might actually be a thing that is going to help me. but it sounds like the most craziest thing that I've ever heard. So let's get on this plane and let's figure this out. So Evan goes into this bizarrish place that is to have all these other reincarnation people, and bizarrely they're training for the karate Olympics in one spot of here, where people are consistently like training using like sticks and stuff to fight one another, and like they're consistently like training every day, and then eventually Evan will be tied to this training, and so Evan is to have these people like bow to him, and he's like, "Why are they bowing to me?" And Nora's like, "Well, that's because they think that you're like your previous incarnations, but you aren't. So you'll get there." So they have to do a battery of tests for Evan. They have to bizarrely like put him into some kind of like MRI like machine that is to consistently hit him with electrodes, as like he is to wear this bizarrish mask on his face, and like they're hoping that maybe that could like trigger something, which it doesn't exactly. We have Evan, who is to also go into combat with a guy named uh, Kovic, and it seems that eventually Evan remembers this like bits and parts uh, of some things, but like not really much of anything really and truly permanent. So let's put a pin in that and let's talk about the bizarrish Porter stuff, because I'm gonna wrap that up fairly quickly. So we have this Porter guy that comes into this thing that a lot of people will remember him from probably Captain America First Avenger. And if not, he's probably in a cluster of other things. So this Porter guy is to all of a sudden like be knowing about Evan and his whole situation, and we have Bathurst, who intercepts into Porter and goes and like drowns him with some kind of thing that looks like syrup to me, and then takes this unique weapon and puts a technological bullet to this guy's head, because evidently this guy is a reincarnation person, and they have this unique gun that if you put this specific bullet to this guy's head, he will never reincarnate again. He'll just be in this bullet and can't get out of it to reincarnate. So this guy will be permanently dead. So eventually, Kovic is to, or Kovic is to eventually tell Evan about this new bullet, and if Evan is to be around this person to have this kind of specific bullet, try to have Evan then die in the old-fashioned way, so that way he doesn't die this way and die forever. So, anyways, so Porter is getting drowned with something that looks like syrup, and also Bathurst also had bizarrely gotten waterboarded in some part of this movie, and I don't understand why. Was he trying to remember something of his past? Because that's what technically happens to Mark Wahlberg in a later part of this movie. Basically, he ends up getting waterboarded. So, uh, so Porter eventually is drowning in syrup, bizarrely, and so Bathurst just kills Porter off. And I'm like, okay, why did any of this happen? Like, it seems that Bathurst has this disagreement with Porter about God, and so like Porter is mentioning to Bathurst about, well, you just have to have faith. And Bathurst is like, dude, I'm not gonna have faith in God. Like, no, I would just rather just kill you off so I have this disagreement be over with and I win because I'm still alive and you're not and you're dead. Sad, sorry for you. So bizarrely, Bathurst has this weird thing with God, and I don't know why. Like at some points, he's even asking like if God is gonna try to prevent him from doing this whole egg thing that eventually is going to happen in this movie. So let's get down to brass tacks. So Evan is to let's go back to the whole Evan stuff because I didn't understand any of that Porter crap. I just like I was just like, okay, God and stuff and belief and oh, whatever. Yeah, just juice on the Barbie. So, pushing on. So, Evan is to find out that it seems that there is an egg that could annihilate everything. A egg could kill the entire world. Because here's the thing. This villainous man wants to wipe out any Infinity character getting reincarnated. And so if there is no one left to get reincarnated because every single person in this world is dead, then everyone will be dead. Even the Infinity people will be dead. So Evan is seeing this whole thing play out and he is desperately trying to like touch people's hands and all these people are Thanos snapping away basically and because of this egg and like he's basically watching like Terminator 2 Judgment Day happen right before his eyes and we all of a sudden have Evan that is almost Thanos snapping as well. And so all of a sudden, Evan gets rang back to like the real world because that was just a virtual like showcasing of what this egg could do. And so it seemed that Evan was the last person, Evan reincarnation previously, before actually Evan, Mark Wahlberg Evan. So really, people are making the consensus that Evan should know where this egg is, and so now he has to know where this egg is. So Bathurst had mentioned that at one time that Evan's character, when they were in interrogation together, Bathurst had mentioned to Evan that I guess Mark Wahlberg had gone so loony bat crap crazy that he had carved in his chest, "Look inside." And so now we have this whole look inside thing mentioned now twice in this movie. And so now Evan is to try as much as humanly possible to remember anything from his reincarnation, like past, but he can't. So now they have to do like the one thing that like they probably don't want to do, and basically they have Evan who now has to go to this guy named Artisan or Artisan. So Evan is to go to this Artisan guy, and so he is to go there because he is to basically get drowned so that way he can have a memory reset of any and all incarnations. And that is, I guess, the reason why Bathurst was also getting waterboarded in the beginning of this movie because he, I guess, was trying to reset his body to think if he missed anything from previous incarnations about where the egg was. So, Evan is to go into this Captain America, the first Avenger, like tube thing to just get drowned. You couldn't have just shoved this guy in a jacuzzi like I just saw in The Uninvited, which was a weird but kooky movie. You couldn't have just like stabbed the man and let him like heavily bleed out. No, like you have to put him in this like big watery tube thing to have him drowned and then like flatliner revive him, but not revive him by having like a defibrillator or anything like that. No, they just have to just pound his chest until hopefully he can just wake up. Like somebody is trying to eventually like perform CPR. And I don't buy for a second that Mark Wahlberg should just revive after them like consistently trying this CPR, and then all of a sudden he just magically deliciously revives. And he just remembers everything. So, because he drowns, and then Artisan is like, dude, we gotta give him a couple minutes and then try to revive him. So Mark is now in this thing drowning, and then eventually they decide, okay, he's been out long enough. So they give him CPR. Coincidentally, Evan does revive, and so he's like, yeah, I remember. I remember it all. I'm now Bourne Identity. Isn't that great? So, Evan had figured out the whole thing of look inside was actually just meaning that he needed to actually look inside his body for the egg. So the previous body that Evan's thing was in is actually where the egg was. So Treadwater actually has the egg inside of him, which was the previous incarnation of Evan. And so, interestingly enough, like, we see Bathurst, who's basically watching every single thing that is going on with Evan and his people, because it seems like Bathurst has just like a camera set up everywhere. So there is no privacy with this guy. I guess he's like tapping into any kind of other camera, or maybe he just has a live feed because he's just that good. And so he's just watching everything. And so Bathurst is like, well, coincidentally, I just have the body of Treadway at my convenience. Then I can just pull this egg out and just be like, I'm going to win, I guess. Let me go and take this egg and put it in this arming device, and I can just obliterate everybody. And so now here is the mad dash of scramble to have Evan, even after he gets shot in the chest and has to get sewn back together, and hopefully he doesn't completely, like, here's the goofy thing. So Evan should be worried about tearing his stitches. Like, stitches is probably like the easiest thing that you could easily tear. And so they're saying, hey man, like you're gonna easily tear your stitches. But then, like, Evan does all of this, like, kung fu fighting and action sequences. Stitches does not tear and him bleed to death. Everything is all cool and chicken babies. And so Evan eventually goes off and tries to get to Bathurst's, like, mansion, because both Artisan and Evan are to go off to try to like drop in to try to help Nora, because Nora is actually trying to get to Bathurst's mansion, but eventually she bumps into some kind of drones along the way. And so Evan eventually is going and collecting up Nora to drive this car to Bathurst's mansion to try to evidently detonate some of the information and stuff that is in this guy's mansion. And so Evan is to go and scramble to intercept Bathurst, who is in this plane. And we're going to quickly, hopefully, get to the end here fairly soon of this movie. So, like, I'm scrambling to just finish this up. So, Nora is to take down one of Bathurst's agents and then eventually goes and blows up this whole setup of Bathurst while she's actually inside getting blown up because she's going to die anyways, so she might as well die right now. Artisan is leaving so that way he doesn't die, because eventually somebody needs to be here to just kind of let everybody know who they all are. Because Artisan is kind of remembering some things of other people, but they don't remember it. So, and eventually, I guess at some point they have to be like jarred into remembering of their past, because eventually once someone gets reincarnated, it seems like it takes them a while to remember things. And we'll get to that eventually here pretty soon. So, Mark Wahlberg is to try to get on this plane, and he does. Mark is to have this sword go into this plane so he can hang on to it. And so Bathurst is now like trying to raucous this plane because evidently one of the engines goes out, but that doesn't stop Bathurst from trying to get Evan off of this plane. He's like jockeying and jiving with this plane, and Evan is trying to hold on with just this this sword. So we find that Evan has this bizarrish power that I do not understand what the heck this power is. Because we had Treadway, who, when he, I guess, was to do this bizarrish, like, stunt thing to get him onto this crane to fight out Bathurst, and I guess both of them fell and died, or, like, it seemed to not really tell me exactly what it exactly happened, but we were just to, I guess, assume that. But yeah, so Treadway, like, when he was, like, outside of his car, he was doing some, like, magical voodoo thing with his hand. And so all of a sudden, Evan was trying to do this, like, voodoo magical thing with his hand, and all of a sudden, like, it seemed like he had the perfect ability to be able to just walk on this plane and, like, seemingly be able to now just get into the plane and try to intercept what Bathurst is doing. So Bathurst has to now go into the cargo part of this plane to try and stop Evan's character from getting the egg. So it kind of just gets to the point to where, like, both Bathurst and Evan are fighting off, like, one or the other, trying to either arm this thing that is attached to the egg, and, like, Bathurst is preventing Evan from trying to disarm this thing and get the egg out of this thing. And plus also, Evan eventually takes his sword and puts it in the armed device thing. So, forcibly, this armed device is to eventually get outside of the plane, so it'll be out of both of their grasps. So Evan jumps out of the plane to go and get it, and of course Bathurst goes after him. And so Bathurst has that weird, goofy gun thing that is to make people no longer be able to reincarnate with a thing of a bullet. So Bathurst is trying to shoot Evan, but eventually this leads to eventually, Evan eventually getting the gun away from Bathurst and eventually shooting Bathurst in the head. Like, it was kind of interesting at one point because Bathurst in the plane had shot Evan, but the only thing is, like, Evan, luckily enough, had a metal plate in his head, so he just took the bullet out and he's like, ha ha ha, evidently you didn't recognize that I have a metal plate in my head. Ha 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 ha, sucks to be you. That you tried to get this out of my head, but that didn't work now, did it? So, but Evan goes and shoots Bathurst, and so now Bathurst can no longer be reincarnated because of this bullet. And so Evan is to go and disarm this thing and get the egg from out of this device. And eventually Evan is to eventually just have to fall into the ocean. Or whatever this body of water is. So, all of a sudden, we are to, as I'm wrapping this up, so that Evan, Mark Wahlberg, dead. I guess the impact of him hitting the water, dead. So, now Evan is a completely different person who had to get born, who had to grow up, and who had to eventually remember who his previous selves were. And Artisan is there to watch over him until he could remember everything. And so this Evan is going and fighting people with this sword. And so Artisan is giving, like, this new Evan back his sword. And so all of a sudden this new Evan is to remember every single thing. And is to mention, like, Artisan, like, it's been a while. And so I'm like, oh my god, like, so are we gonna go into the sequel with this guy, or are they gonna just, like, try to retcon or whatever that they need a new star, a new big star for the next film? So they're just gonna have to, like, continue on this, like, thing of just creating this whole new character for the sequel movie, and he's probably gonna have a different name, or they're gonna go with the same name. Like, it's probably gonna be like Altered Carbon all over again, where, like, in the first one, he was one guy throughout the whole entire thing, but then coincidentally in the second season, all of a sudden, since the other guy didn't want to come for the second season, they just had to put him in Anthony Mackie's body, and then Anthony Mackie had to do the whole entire second season. Like, that's probably what's going on for, like, probably every one of these movies that they even do a sequel of this. We're just gonna get, like, different big celebrities to do this movie, and that'll be the way that it plays out. So without a doubt, I am going to get out of here. And yeah, like, that's, like, pretty much a bulk of the movie. I skipped over a lot of the details of this film because I'm like, they explain it and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Because if anything, there's some technical jargonish things that they try to, like, talk about in this movie, and I'm like, I don't even want to try to, like, explain that or even go into that. So if you are going into this thinking that you're going to get a thorough explanation of Infinity, you need a smarter person for that, or you need a person that just really, like, this movie was like, oh man, this movie was great for another person. And, like, there's obviously Infinity explained, I'm sure, or the ending explained, or whatever explained of this movie, but I'm sadly just not that guy. So if you're looking for real true knowledge of this film, head somewhere else. But for me, like, I was just like, there's something about this, but also there's a lot of just failed attempts at this movie. But anyways, I am going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.